Hi, everyone. We'll just give a few minutes for folks to join. Hi to those who have just joined. I'm just going to give a minute or so for others to get online. Give another minute. All right, I'll pop my slides up and slowly get started here. Just give me a second. I got a few screens going here. Can someone unmute and tell me if you see that?
Yes, it looks well.
Perfect. All right, thank you. You got a thumbs up there. All right, well, I think others may join, but since we've got, I think, a critical mass here, I'm going to go ahead and get started. So thank you so much for joining us. It's a very busy time of the year as folks wrap up for the calendar year, and so really appreciate folks making time for this session. As was sort of communicated, today's session is, I think, a little bit different than the ones we've been running. So throughout the fall, we've had a very sort of purposeful set of speakers talking about responsible research assessment in the Canadian context and how that might support reproducibility, as well as a number of other sort of change movements, such as knowledge mobilization, research impact, EDI, and so on. But today, the purpose is actually to think a little bit more reflectively actually about our reproducibility network as a whole, and sort of what we want to do with the network, the programming we want to offer, any type of meta research we want to do, and how we can use this network to sort of achieve our collective purpose more clearly. So just to kick off, my slides aren't moving. Just to acknowledge, I'm calling in from Ottawa, and ceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe people. And so obviously we recognize the Indigenous peoples in our region, but also all regions across Canada who've made Ottawa and Canada their home. And in Ottawa, at the Heart Institute where I work, we dedicate ourselves in particular to partnership and reconciliation and taking responsibility for the heart health of all Canadians. So if you're interested, if you'd like to sort of note in the chat where you're calling in from, please do so. In terms of today's session, as I said, I'm going to provide a bit of an update of sort of some of the stuff that we've been doing in the background on the network, but then really want to spend the last part of the meeting actually ideally having people turn their cameras on and unmute and having a dialogue about where to take our network, topics of interest, and leaders in our midst that might want to move specific themes forward, and also talk about thinking around funding opportunities to really leverage funding to get this off the ground more concretely. So I'll try to go through this quickly so that we have lots of time for discussion. But if there are questions or comments, please just ask them. I can't see right now if people are raising hands, so please unmute and interrupt. That's absolutely fine. Okay, so in terms of background, our reproducibility network, sort of in terms of what we're doing as a formal collective, launched in 2022. And we, at the time, there was a small steering committee of 5 people, including David Mower, who's on the line today. Where we decided, based on our own interests and some of our connections to other reproducibility networks in the, across the global community, we wanted to focus on open scholarship or open science, if that's if you're in a science discipline, with a specific focus on data sharing and reuse. Research assessment, which I think we've done fairly well this fall and getting some training out on that topic. And then research methods and metrics, so kind of more meta science type topics. And finally, patient and citizen science. So that's sort of how we've structured our aims, and some of the content on the website focuses on this as well. This is not written in stone, but that's sort of where this initially came from. And so what I'll do now is I'll take you through some of the key activities from coming together as a small handful of people to where we are today. So we've done a couple of things. The first is a national survey. The second is creating a database of researchers and research staff and folks sort of in our space interested in this topic. And then we've had our responsible research assessment community of practice speaker series and network that's kind of taken off from within CARN. So more specifically, in terms of our national survey, the aim of this survey was to understand perceptions of reproducibility across all disciplines in Canada, and we included researchers as well as research librarians in our sample. And so the idea was that there's a cross-section of sort of a measuring where we are right now in terms of reproducibility in the Canadian ecosystem, and we asked about barriers, training gaps, and incentive structures for folks. And because we were sending out this large national survey, we threw in some sort of related concepts around open science or open scholarship, which can, of course, foster and support reproducibility, as well as research security, because there was a lot of changes to the research security policy landscape in Canada. So understanding how folks understand those policies and support sort of transparency and sharing while balancing research security. In terms of our method, this study was conducted this year. As I said, it was cross-sectional national survey. And how we did this is we targeted researchers and trainees who had been funded by one of the 3 agencies. So the agencies make public a list of their sort of funded grants. And what we did is we took a random sample of 2,700 researchers from the agencies, 900 from each funder. And then using a national data set that's been sort of created by the community of librarians, we took a sample of 300 academic librarians, and we sent them emails, these randomly selected folks, to take part in our survey, and reminded them a bit. The survey was anonymous and it was bilingual, and it was open for 4 weeks. The instrument was purpose-built, so we made it up for our specific needs. There was demographics. There was a lot of questions focusing on perceptions and experiences, and then a section around training, education, incentives, and barriers. And so some just quick results that I think are helpful to inform our network. We had over 300 people take part, so 337. Majority of them were in Ontario and Quebec, which I think makes up a reflective demographic of where funding goes in this country, followed by Alberta, BC, Nova Scotia, and Manitoba. We asked a ton of questions. I'm not going to take you through all of the answers here today, but just to give you a bit of a flavor of where we're at. We anticipate, hopefully before the year is out, getting a preprint so I can share that. But we had folks across all career stages, slight overrepresentation of senior researchers. And you can see across disciplines as well. Agricultural sciences was very poorly represented, but maybe captured in some of the other buckets in terms of social science or engineering and technology as well. We asked researchers, is there a reproducibility crisis? and 65.6% of respondents thought there was a reproducibility crisis. And then this is based on the same question that was asked in a survey by Monya Baker that was published in Nature several years ago. We used the same item. We asked them whether it was a slight crisis or a significant crisis, or whether not at all, or they were unsure. And we find results that are actually quite consistent with that survey that Monya did years ago, and that the general direction, leaving out agricultural sciences where there's a very low sample of the findings, is the same across our sort of disciplinary buckets. So people think there is indeed a reproducibility crisis. So it suggests there's a need and a space for dialogue such as the network we're all part of. In terms of like what factors contribute to reproducible research, you can look here the sort of mapping that's been done, but one of the main issues that always contributes is pressure to publish. I don't know if you see my cursor, but that was the one that people felt always contributed to the greatest proportion. And so I think the link to responsible research assessment and our focus of having a community of practice within this network on that topic is also very pertinent, because it's clear there's a link between responsible research assessment and people's ability to produce reproducible research. And then other topics you can see here in varying different frequencies came up as quite likely to contribute or always contributing as well. Another fairly big one was selective reporting of the published literature. So this is really relevant for practices such as study registration or pre-registration in some disciplines as well. When we asked, people say, okay, there's a reproducibility crisis. They say this sort of irrespective of their career stage and their discipline. We then asked sort of what percent of research do you think in your discipline is reproducible? And it's around 58% of research. So a significant proportion folks are saying are not reproducible. And when we look at the responses, you can see there's like a clustering around that sort of 50-60% across all disciplines. So again, it doesn't seem to be something specific to a specific discipline in our country. Looking at sort of institutional context, we asked, true, false, or unsure. My institution would value me doing new research more than doing replication studies. Overwhelming majority felt that was true. And then we also asked, in my research setting, it would be harder to find funding to conduct a replication study than it would be to find funding for a new study. So again, pointing to sort of cultural norms around fostering things that are sort of new and shiny, and not thinking so much about sort of reproducibility and perhaps rigor in providing divergent, conceptually replicated studies providing similar evidence. And then the last one before I'll move on. Obviously, there's a slew of other findings. We can share the preprint, as I said, but I think it's helpful to think about our network and what the community has said in this survey. So reproducibility is widely considered a problem across disciplines. And when we asked, what do you see as the biggest barrier to improving reproducibility in the Canadian context, we can see here that lack of funding is pretty clear, as well as lack of incentives and the pressure to publish. So this, I think, is something relevant in terms of any sort of advocacy work that the community might want to do in terms of changing the system or acknowledging how funding is handed out. So all that to say, a lot of work to do in terms of reproducibility, perceptions, practices, and addressing some of these barriers in our context. Okay, and then very quickly, I'll go through the second bit I wanted to update on, which is our researchers database. So just a single slide here to say that we started again in 2025, an initiative where we were curating a list of researchers and their affiliations that are actively doing research in this sort of reproducibility network space. So open science, meta research, research assessment. We've had over 60 members join the database so far. And so this is sort of helping to curate folks and create a community of people. If you're working in the space and you're looking for others in your discipline, for instance, trying to break down barriers and reduce silos so that people can connect. And, one of Canada's a very large country, but one of the challenges about that is that dialogue and exchange can be hard if people aren't sort of interacting and crossing paths. So the idea of this was that this might help highlight who these people are, both from a national as well as an international perspective, acknowledging networks like our own exist around the world, and there may be people working in your discipline in other countries that may want to work with you. So you can access that on the website. It's publicly available. And if you'd like to join, there's the opportunity to do that on the website as well. Okay, so the third and sort of final thing that I wanted to sort of highlight that we did was, of course, this speaker series on responsible research assessment. So really great talks from all four of our speakers. So Eli, Rad, Gabriel, and Catherine all gave talks on various topics related to implementation of responsible research assessment and changing research culture. And in terms of so far, what we've done is planned another session of speakers around a number of different topics relating to reproducibility. So these haven't taken place yet, but they've been booked. So I just want to highlight, we'll be sending out the notifications of these if Mamoon hasn't done it already very soon. We have Krista Byers-Heinlein, who works in big team science and going to be speaking about a large SSHRC grant that she and Kylie Hanlon have around that topic. David Mower will talk about a project that we've been doing over a couple of years around transforming research assessment criteria to support openness and trustworthiness at academic institutions or research performing organizations. Jonathan Kimmelman from McGill will speak about the entanglement of reproducibility and ethics from his perspective as a basic scientist too. And then Shinichi Nakagawa from Alberta is going to be speaking about his experience actually as a former member of the Australian Reproducibility Network and sort of lessons learned from that and his own meta research in the Canadian context. So with that, I'm going to stop. That's sort of what we've done. I'll stop sharing my screen and ideally have folks sort of put their cameras on and have a chat now. In terms of framing, just some things that I'll open it up sort of very broadly, but then can structure it if it's helpful. In terms of our different topic areas, I would like to identify someone to lead each of these more formally, and then my team can act as a convener or coordinator of those leads. And so I'm happy to say that Dr. Anna Armand has volunteered to lead this first topic around open scholarship with a focus on data sharing and reuse. There's several people who've reached out about the research assessment space, and I'd like to sort of formally identify someone. And then the meta science and patient and citizen science, same thing. And during our conversation, I'd like to talk also about funding. So right now, we have some small amount of funding that's supporting Mamoon, who's on the call, for him to work as an RA. We'd like, obviously, to get more. It makes things easier to work with the support of people like Mamoon. I will say that right now I have put a proposal in to SSHRC, a direct proposal looking to leverage their President's Fund. And I believe they had a briefing about it today, and we should hopefully know by the end of the year if they'll accept that. And that is something a few folks on the call have been part of, including David Mower and Jason Pither and Anna as well. It was about bringing together a group of folks to put on a reproducibility summer school targeting trainees. So that's sort of what we've done. There's lots that can be done, and I'll stop sharing now. And if folks are willing to put their cameras on, any sort of feedback on what we've done to date is helpful. But I think really trying to look forward in terms of what this network can be, what you guys want to do in terms of leveraging work. What are you doing as part of the network? One thing that's been great, especially for our responsible research assessment community of practice, is that the uptake of education when we've put it out there has been incredible. So we've had folks, there were several hundred people on some of these calls that we, advertised just through LinkedIn and nothing more formal than this. So there's appetite for this, and I think we just need to structure our community a little bit more to really coordinate amongst different folks. So I'll stop there and open it up. I see some of you, thank you, have put your cameras on. Anyone have any initial thoughts in terms of what we could do or what we have done? Dom, go ahead.
Yeah, let me first say it's great to see everyone here. I'm really excited about CARN, this town hall, and the future of work that hopefully we'll all do to promote reproducibility across Canada. Just to reiterate that proposal that Kelly's putting in at SSHRC, yeah, briefly note went through today, so we should hear back from them, or at least from SSHRC, relatively soon, I believe, before the holidays. And if it's not successful for that kind of targeted funding, then there's the opportunity to apply for a connection grant to host a summer school. So Kelly and I are working on that. But it made me think also when you mentioned like other sources of funding. I agree, the more money the network has, the more can be done. So the tri-agencies are one area, one source of funding, but it would be interesting to look at other options as well. I've worked at SORT and led the funding committee for a while, and we were successful at approaching societies and publishers, select publishers. They don't necessarily give tons of money, but sometimes it's enough to launch certain things. I was thinking specifically about like CSP. Kelly, if you've thought about reaching out to them. Michael Donaldson there might be interested in supporting the work of CARN. I wonder about the FRQ as well. Anyways, we can chat about this at another time, but people have contacts, and I think it would be great to spread the words and let people know that CARN's there to serve the research community, but the impact of that and how well it can be done depends on how well we're supported.
For sure, and I can add and expand on that. One of the things that we're also doing sort of in the background, I didn't describe because it's sort of a bit opaque to me at this point, but I attend the like International Reproducibility Network meetings. So there's meetings like the Network of Networks meetings, and they're through the UKRI, they're also trying to get funding centrally to that sort of network of networks that would then be divided out. So I'm also contributing in that respect. But if anyone has ideas, we've got Mamoon taking notes here for us, and we will explore all of these in depth. Other sort of opening thoughts? What about in terms of like disciplinary focus? So we've done a lot on responsible research assessment, we've done some on data management and open science. Is there sort of folks on the line that see other angles in terms of reproducibility that they are keen on seeing? Or I guess I feel particularly David and I, who've been sort of part of the network since the start, we're very conscious that it feels like we're just like creating content and assuming that's the right thing without sort of getting feedback. So, we are very flexible and don't want this to be sort of thrown down at you. Spencer.
Thank you. This is only the second meeting that I've attended, so this is all new to me. What attracted me, I saw the word reproducibility, and I'm very interested, but I think it's a very different context. I'm interested in reproducible computational science. So you run your software, and then someone else runs the software and gets a different answer, or can't run your software. Or you have a model and you publish it in a paper and people can't reproduce your computational results. And you use the word crisis, it's definitely a crisis. It's actually very rare that people can reproduce. But I'm trying to tell if I fit in this group. That's why I wanted to come to the town hall. And you can let me know.
I think, well, speaking as like N of one, coordinator's privilege, I think you do. I think that's not an area where for instance, David and I, who've trying to get this off the ground, where we have expertise, but it's something I would love to see take shape, and for, you know, yourself or others from your discipline to take leadership on bringing that discussion to our community and connecting folks in the Canadian space that are working on that. And I think, you know, there's people like myself who, you know, their whole career is meta science and meta research, but I know there's a ton of people in this country that, like, you know, they're practitioners of meta science or open science as part of their research program. And I'd love to start pulling some of those people to the front to actually give those sort of disciplinary and sort of their more context specific sessions. So I think that would be of great interest. I don't know if others have ideas. I saw David thumbs up, few nods. You may have just like roped yourself into a talk, Spencer. I think, you know, that's for me, it's like starting the conversation, right? And trying to understand sort of what you're doing, how we can support you. And yeah.
Sure. Thank you.
Jason.
Yeah, this is fantastic to see the momentum building here. So thanks to everyone for these efforts. I just have a quick question, I guess mostly related to your efforts around the you know, research assessment work that you're doing right now. And I'm wondering if there's been efforts to connect with faculty associations across the country and an effort to sort of coordinate you know, information sessions or something, because my suspicion is that, you know, especially if we can sort of level the sort of background knowledge across the board, it might be easier to effect change through administration if we have faculty associations on. So can you tell me a little bit about that, if there's been any efforts?
For sure. So we're in the midst of trying to do something. So one of the things that I've recently attended or contributed to was a meeting, I guess last week, 2 weeks ago, it all kind of blends, in Copenhagen. And it was a meeting of the European Commission. So Copenhagen or Denmark has the presidency right now, and they put on a big meeting around responsible research assessment. And so there was Canadians represented at this, which was fantastic. And one of the things we felt, I think, very sort of motivated being at the meeting to see all the work that's happening and the changes that are happening. One of the things we're looking to do right now is to hold a national sort of summit around responsible research assessment. And so we have a couple institutions, one of which is UVic, that have kind of come to the fore and said that they want to take a bit of a leadership on that. And so I think it's trying to understand, I think it's great that it's UVic because in my space, we have connections to sort of the U15, but there's so many other universities beyond that. So if there are networks of these institutions, I think this would be an obvious way to get at these folks. And there has been some work. I see different folks on the line. I know Stephanie Warner, who's here, and Erica Conte, for instance. They've done work at CARA, the Canadian conference, so for administrative research, and that's also a great venue, right? Because these are the people who are actually making the changes too. But if there are ideas about this, or you'd like to get involved in that sort of working group, we're super keen to move that forward.
Yes, so that's fantastic to hear. There's a couple things then I want to bring up. So here at UBC, I've been working a bit to try and identify the sort of Venn diagrams and how they overlap across research assessment, which often comes under VPRI type things. There's VP academic, that, you know, teaching and learning and all these kinds of things. And there's huge opportunities to actually identify these strategic efforts that often are dealt with in silos. And so that's something that I'll report back on and to see how it goes here. But so far, it's been pretty receptive. They recognize that there's a heck of a lot of overlap in terms of these goals that you have here with all of these different units at a given university, right?
For sure.
The second thing was, it's fantastic if UVic is going to host that, because there might be an opportunity. Maybe this would be a bit much to ask, but UVic is really a leader around Indigenous data sovereignty work as well. Mm-hmm. And it might be a really neat opportunity to host sort of a parallel workshop that examines the perceived conflicts, but opportunities around open science and Indigenous data sovereignty. So that's something I'd be happy to help with if interested.
I think that that's right, and I see there's comments in the chat about the first sort of open science conference as well, and so there's I feel like exactly as you're saying, there's all these sort of movements that are happening that are like same but different, right? Like so it's like bringing people together and having that dialogue. So for instance, I in the past years have connected with like the research impact community, which is distinct from the responsible research assessment community, but shares many goals, right? And I think that's what you're saying in terms of these different communities too, is, you know, it's like we have different perspectives or different sort of mechanisms for prompting action, but our goals are the same and we need to be dialoguing. And presently, I don't think there's a lot of that. All right, David.
Thanks, Kelly. So one thing I've tried to do unsuccessfully, but if there may be people in here in on our call today, is I've reached out to the Royal Society of Canada because they reflect a broad disciplinary reach, and sort of asked them, could they host something? Could they try to do a report on, you know, obviously issues of reproducibility are felt across disciplines to a large degree. I can't even get them to answer me, and I don't know whether it's just me. It could be just me, but I think there are also you know, other organizations, and I wish I knew how to connect with the U15 just as a starting point. They're obviously not the ending point, but again, how could we get them involved? They seem, both organizations would seem to be incredibly important in trying to move this forward. And the last point I just wanted to make is that it seems to me that you know, a few years ago, the idea of sharing data was put to patients of research studies, and they very much supported the idea of sharing data. Sharing data is sort of part of trying to fix reproducibility problems. And I wonder whether there's a patient organization that we could get to help us, because I think they're an incredibly, you know, patient and the public, I shouldn't just limit it to patients, but I think they're an incredibly important interest holder to help push this forward.
For sure, and that really resonates. Like coming off this EU meeting in Denmark, it was very clear that public trust in science is very much a science policy sort of agenda item right now, whether that's in data sharing or in other aspects of research, in terms of, you know, whether the public even believes the research that is produced. That was one of our sort of buckets that we wanted to focus on when we launched this network. I don't know if there's anyone on the line or anyone that could be suggested as someone who might actually sort of lead that working group to start having those conversations. But I think it's really important from the sort of citizen science perspective as well. There's various studies showing sort of trust in science is waning, and in terms of the geopolitical situation right now, there seems to be a bit of a knee-jerk reaction to close down sharing to an extent, to sort of mitigate the sort of geopolitical context. So thinking about sort of how we balance open with restricted and you know, continue to have transparency is I think a really timely and critical topic moving forward. Stephanie?
Yeah, thanks. I think this idea, like where there's kind of these different working groups emerging, what I really appreciate is the connection of these groups. Like we can group them under reproducibility. Sometimes we group them under things like impact, depending on kind of your flavor. But I think that kind of groundswell approach to this and connecting those ideas together is crucial for movement to happen regardless. Whether
Yeah.
it's, we're talking a lot about responsible research assessment and open research and Indigenous data sovereignty, but none of these things, as we know, can exist in a vacuum or in isolation. In order for there to be more responsible research assessment, we need to think about, well, what does count and what is valuable in scholarship. And then in order for reproducibility to move forward, it's like, well, who cares about research reproducibility if it's not being recognized and rewarded through the systems that like researchers are considering. So I just wanted to say kudos for kind of bringing this together under these different kind of auspices and bringing the communities together, and that connection about, or conversation about like discussions between networks, I think is really crucial as well. We're also a member of Research Impact Canada, which, as you mentioned, the research impact community is big in this space too. So I think more and more opportunities for people to kind of cross-pollinate will be really beneficial.
Yeah, for sure. So trying to sort of look at the chat, some of the comments and feedback too, but sort of synthesize as we're going. So some of the things, if I'm understanding correctly, that I'm hearing from folks is that we obviously have broad expertise in many topics related to reproducibility in Canada and people actively working in this space already. And what this network could do is possibly better convene them through working groups or connect them. But that, as Stephanie just sort of alluded to, there needs to be sort of an overarching connection that links these working groups to make sure that we're working towards sort of a common goal and not sort of siloing together. Is that kind of what I'm understanding? Is that correct? So I'm getting a nod, at least one or two nods. Okay, so I'll just assume that's correct. So what do we need to do, like on our side, in terms of practically getting this done? Like, should we, formally sort of write down a few buckets? So Spencer's, for instance, suggested sort of a new bucket that could be relevant. Do we want to write down some buckets and then folks sort of fill in some sort of survey to indicate what working group that they want to be part of and go from there, or multiple working groups? Is this a approach that might make sense? Yeah, a few nods. Ismail?
So, Ismail here, calling in from Cape Breton, Nova Scotia. This is my first call, and I think I'm echoing quite a few of the other things that have been said. Like, it's an incredible effort that you've got this group together, and that you're running this. And I'm just learning about what you're doing, so this is wonderful. I work with a few different organizations, Go Fair US being a big one, where they advocate for the FAIR principles, usually in data science contexts. My own background is philosophy of social sciences, so I'm the annoying guy who will say we're more complicated than meta science. Meta science isn't meta enough. I think your last question there, if this can become a place that becomes another network of networks, or at least a convening space for those different partnerships, I think that would be an incredible thing to do. I've been in conversations with the Association of Research Libraries, which covers research libraries across the US and Canada, and that's another voice that I think would need to be part of this. This is a negative framing, but it would be a real shame if those conversations weren't enabled. The other only point I want to make, and I'll make this on every call and every time I have the chance, we can't drop the culture, the issue of culture. So I loved the survey you presented, the fact that publish or perish appeared on at least one of the answers. It is frustrating for me, so I'm coming from the UK, I'm not sure if the accent shows, to see that, I'm seeing the same publish or perish culture being the issue across all spaces. So yeah, if we're able to not drop that. Last thing, patience. These sorts of conversations, if we're also able to bring in voices who are patient representatives, because otherwise we fall in the trap of speaking amongst ourselves, speaking amongst either
Exactly.
scientists or researchers and academics and so on. So I'll leave it there, but thank you for
Yeah.
creating this space.
Thank you, and thanks for joining. I think you're right, and this is the challenge, because of course, like, we have this bucket of sort of patient or citizen science, and it also needs to be a cross-cutting theme across all the working groups, right? So it's a balance. Shinichi,
Hello, can you hear me?
we
Yeah.
can.
Yeah. Thank you very much for this, town hall, and it's excited to see the very exciting, like nearly 40 people here. I just wanted to ask you, Kelly and David. So it sounds like you are trying to organize sort of topic-wise leads and some of the working group. And as you know, the UK Reproducibility Network, which is very successful, and their success, my understanding, comes from this local leads. They have at many universities, if not all the universities, they have those local leads, and central decide to do something, and they kind of do the similar sort of thing, or they have a template they follow. And the thing is, nobody else replicated the UK Reproducibility Network's success.
Mm-hmm.
We tried in Australian Reproducer Network, even talking, several times to the UK Reproducible Network. So my question here is, have you thought about this local sort of focused lead approach in contrast to, you are trying to do topic-based one?
Yeah, for sure. It's definitely an interesting idea, and I think in Canada the sort of closest thing to that would be, that I know of at least, is TOSI's. Sort of the Tenenbaum Open Science Institute has created sort of different institutional partnerships with various neuroscience institutions across the country. And part of that is that they need a person. So they give money, but they require match funding, and that they have to have at least one person fully dedicated to this. So maybe there's some opportunity of working with those folks. I think the one critical difference between the UKRI and us, at least right now, is the funding, right? And so I think getting an initial grant could get us off the ground, could help do that. In terms of, well, obviously you know this, but I'll share for others, the summer school that we put in an application for, the idea is that this reproducibility summer school would create a network of champions, and so they would be early career researchers or trainees, but a big focus of that was creating a cohort of people who would be connected and could come back to subsequent summer schools and learn more, or even teach on those and contribute to the network. I feel for myself, and others on the call may feel similarly, as someone who full-time does meta research in open science. It's quite isolating in Canada. When I'm in Europe, it's like I feel like in an echo chamber of people who are doing this. There's so many people I can run my ideas by. But in Canada, there's not places to convene, and there's not places, for instance, like my postdoc Anna, who's on the call today, there's not a network of people like her I can plug her into. And so that's something we're really keen to create through this, is sort of networks of, whether it's research administrative staff, scientists, trainees, and definitely doing that at the institutional level may be very effective. Erica?
Hi, Kelly. Thank you so much for pulling us all together and for helping to lead this conversation. I've loved the sessions you guys have had so far. But one thought I might have is, it's a lot of work, right? And especially when we don't have funding. So I'm wondering how we can leverage each other and the things that we're maybe all doing already, maybe across Canada. So for example, at Unity Health, I have a monthly webinar on research integrity with different topics each month.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe
Mm-hmm.
that's something that I could open up to the entire reproducibility network, to have people from across Canada joining. Similarly, I would bet that there's things happening in Calgary for that Stephanie might be leading, that she might be able to open up, and then we can all kind of help to advertise, and therefore it doesn't need to be just you guys running all of the events for everybody. So kind of capitalizing on kind of what we're already doing is one idea. You kind of brought up leveraging CARA. And I think there's a lot of people in CARA that would be very interested in joining the reproducibility network. So that's more from like the research management, research administration side of things versus the scientist side of things. But I think, you know, bringing that multidisciplinary aspects together, I think is going to be really important to move it forward. So maybe even presenting things about what the network is and what we're trying to do at an upcoming CARA conference. Similarly, there's things like QARA, which is more international, right? So, and it expands even larger, right? So you can think I'm recently leading a new QARA working group on university rankings. And you can think, how does that really relate to reproducibility? But we know that that publish to perish is in place because our universities have certain pressures on them, things like university rankings, in order to publish as quickly as possible, right? So they're all really, really related as to what we're doing together. And I think we should make sure that whatever we're doing, we're not doing in isolation. I really liked the ideas of your different working groups, and maybe the first thing each of those working groups could do is get together and really decide what is it that that they plan to actually do, right? I find some working groups get together and there's a lot of talking, and yes, we want to, you know, have more workshops to talk some more, but what is it that they're actually going to work on and what are their goals? I think would be really important to hammer out within the first, you know, 6 months.
Yeah, so I think maybe we could coordinate the folks into the different working groups. They would have almost like a call like we're having now, like a bit of a town hall on their topic, get to know who's on the call, what their expertise are, what they're doing. And then maybe we could create a bit of a structure that each of the working groups could do to kind of work through, you know, like what topics are of interest, what types of outreach or activities are of interest. Like, do they want to do education training? Do they want to sort of just bring people together to get, say, feedback on research and progress? Like, what is it that they actually want to achieve? And then we would have a sort of a mapping of all of the different working groups and what they want to do. And then we could convene together like as a collective, like we're doing today, and then see sort of where there's overlap, where there's not, and think about sort of practically, you know, how to do this. It would seem at that point we would have the input for a grant, right? Like it would be clear the different activities, the different scope of people involved. Somewhere, looking at you, Dom, somewhere within our federal agencies, we'd have to identify some sort of call that would be relevant for this. There's also, and Erica, you might be helpful in this respect. I'm sure others on the call have expertise, but Horizon Europe, there's the WIDERA calls from Horizon Europe that are coming out again in 2026, but it feels to me at least like a full-time job to even understand the call. So, you know, if we're able to put some of our research admin folks together who already know this landscape, I think I'd seen someone else earlier on the call that comes from the European context and has experience from these as well. So that could be really helpful and a powerful source of funding. I understand that Horizon is primed to give money to Canada now that we've joined. So yeah, there, it's Maria. There you are, Maria, please.
Hi, sorry, I can't put my camera on because I'm on the phone. I mean, I can, but you don't want me to.
We don't want to see your ear.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I feel a little called out, Kelly, because I work on Horizon Europe a lot. It's a big part of what I do. I don't think WIDERA is honestly the best choice, but I was thinking this whole time, I'm kind of glad you called me out, because I was like hemming and hawing whether to raise my hand. And I do think, I mean, Horizon Europe is the biggest R&D funding program in the world. There is no one who has more money for R&D at the moment. And Canada, any institution, and it doesn't have to be a research institution, anything with a legal entity based in Canada can apply to Horizon Europe now. That includes businesses, anything, right? The example I always give is, if your book club has a legal entity, it could very theoretically apply to Horizon Europe, right? Which I don't recommend because, as you said, there's a lot of paperwork involved. But having said that, I mean, I do a lot of work on this, and I work with the EU delegation to Canada as well. And I was thinking, just as you were talking, whether that is in terms of international collaboration, there's a huge in terms of what Horizon Europe requires of open science, I actually gave a presentation on this recently, and I think that's what we might have connected on. There's way more that Europeans ask for and require in terms of open science than currently the Tri-Council, right? And some of the Tri-Council requirements are starting to line up with the European ones, but the European ones are still sort of ahead of that a little bit. So there's room there. I was wondering if there's room there to talk to the EU delegation to Canada, and I can take that on easily because I work with them, about doing something together with the network around open science as an introduction to like either furthering international collaboration or really starting those conversations about funding. Because I mean, it's hundreds of billions of euro available to Canadians at the moment. So I would be very happy to take that on. I would be very happy to talk to the EU delegation. And I really think, I'm so glad you brought this up because I really think this is definitely something that that should be looked into.
Wonderful. Thanks, Maria. So we've all heard Maria will get us the funding from Horizon Europe. So that's great.
Yeah, no, not exactly. I'd love to. I would so love to, but I can definitely help. I'd love to help.
Awesome. And I'd be happy to connect one-on-one if that's helpful as well, and sort of some of the things that we've been thinking about in the background. And I think as these sort of smaller working group conversations happen, it'll be emerge more clearly in terms of what we have as assets, so to speak, in Canada, and what we need and what the gaps are. Yeah, I feel like I need someone like you, Maria, to like download their brain to me in terms of understanding the Horizon Europe schemes. They're very complex. At least for me, it feels like I need to take a week off to just read them. So if we have people amongst us who can help navigate that path, I think that's super powerful.
I mean, honestly, sorry, I didn't raise my hand. I just went and talked straight ahead, but I'm happy. I mean, I've been doing this so much for so many people, like an introductory, like hour-long basics of what you need to know about Horizon Europe and where to find further information. If it's useful, I'd be very happy to do that for this network or like, I don't know, more selectively. Anyway, I have a presentation prepared just for that. Like, what do you need to know, where to find the info, all that. So happy to do that if that's useful.
Absolutely. Excellent. Other thoughts in terms of feedback? I'm looking in the chat, which I've absolutely not kept pace with, but if there's anyone who wrote something in the chat that wants to share it to the room, let us know. I'm just looking through the names, if there's anyone I need to call out specifically again. Any like ECRs or trainees on the call have any perspectives that they want to share in terms of what would be helpful for them or sort of their community, or just, you know, things in the Canadian context that you'd like to change? No. God, I would have had a rant. Lots of things bugged me as a trainee. Dom?
I'm not an ECR anymore, but if I was one, and I feel like I was one not that long ago, I would advocate for like top-up funding to grants like given by the federal agencies and FRQ and other provincial funders for reproducible research practices. I wonder if that's something that we could think of down the road to try and lobby. I'm wearing my researcher hat here, you know, for these things to happen.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's one of the frustrations many of us face, is that, you know, you can, for instance, budget for data management or budget for open access publishing, but it's not that the pool of funds has grown either, right?
But so, even for ECRs, just for adopting good practices, whether it's like pre-registration, data code sharing, the types of things that like aren't required. You know, the agency will require immediate open access soon, and there's no plan to provide additional funding for that. But like things that are encouraged and technically should be rewarded through responsible research assessment, but funders are slow at changing it's happening. It's definitely happening. Like we could see that at CIHR, like they've adopted their new research excellence framework, but like how does that translate to actual concrete like steps to encourage people to adopt these practices?
I see a comment from Thane in the chat. So it's librarians have been mentioned and as important to this, but not currently seeing the natural fit so far. Maybe requires further discussion. I think that for me, absolutely, we should discuss further. But in terms of how we've connected so far with respect to the librarian community, and of course we included them in our survey because we do see them as quite central to the network. We've done quite a bit around like RDM, so research data management, that's often centralized through an RDM librarian or RDM office, often at institutional libraries. So there's been some clear connection there. And I think also the responsible research assessment movement, I think that has impact and reporting often sits with our librarian scholars as well. But there may be other inroads or things you, Thane, or your community are doing that also relate and we're not aware of. So we need to become aware of that if there are others. I'm looking in the chat. So Isabel would love to see a network for people working in similar positions like research staff, access to a network through TOSI, but there's surely opportunity to grow beyond TOSI sites and beyond the discipline, right? So I think probably, as Erica mentioned, through CARA, there could also be some links there. It's a very connected and sort of powerful community. Is the CARA conference like in person this year?
It is. It's in Richmond, BC in May. And abstracts are currently open, so we can think if there's something from this group that we wanted to put forward.
That's great. That would be great. And
it's also right after the WCRI conference in Vancouver, so I
yes,
some people
I'm thinking if I can link the two together.
That's great. That's great.
We could have a CARN workshop in between the two.
Exactly. We'll just spend the month in BC, guys. It'll be personally, I have a preference to shifting to February to get out of Ottawa, but I guess the spring's fine too. That's great though, and I think Erica, you said this, and I think this is like definitely my vision. So just to re-articulate, like there's so much happening already, and I think it's about like, you know, throwing the CARN logo on it and connecting as a network to like leverage one another as a system, right? So we don't need to, you know, start everything from scratch. There's so much happening, and people are doing, you know, for example, responsible research assessment. They don't even know they're doing responsible research assessment, but you know, there are organizations doing this under the guise of something else, right? So maybe it's moving forward EDI initiatives or data sovereignty, and so there's links that we can build in. CARA, I think, okay, great. Schedule for the CARN virtual speakers. Yes, we will share that. I don't know, Mamoon, if it's been sent out or not, the speaker series for next year, but I think that if it's not, it will be done pretty eminently. All right, so we're coming up to the hour. Any last suggestions or thoughts? I think what I can say is that we'll have taken notes throughout this session, and we'll come back to you with like a summary. We'll certainly share the next session links, and then maybe a bit of an action plan in terms of how to get these working groups off the ground. And so probably what I'm thinking from the top of my head, which is never good, is that maybe I'll share like some sort of shared document where I propose names or buckets of potential working groups, and then people can, you know, we don't have to wordsmith exactly what they are, but if there's something missing, then I would want to know, and we can add a bucket, and then people can tentatively add their name and detail to those buckets, and then we can work from there. We'll create a structure so that at least as the working groups launch, there's some consistency in terms of how things are done and what's captured. And as it was mentioned, making sure that it's not just, you know, a bunch of people connecting to work. There's actually a specific goal and, you know, a timeline for, you know, a first deliverable. And I think really thinking about funding, and Maria, you're going to be contacted ASAP after this call, probably by a slew of us, but definitely by me, to think about sort of the horizon opportunities. Any other thoughts? Jason is shocked by the quarry costs. David, would you like to answer? Why is it so expensive?
I apologize.
I
apologize. I mean, Vancouver is a super expensive city, but you're right. But
yeah.
No worries. It's just because it contrasts with our typical little dinky science conferences that cost
For sure.
$400 or $500.
Yeah.
Where you just like create a cost so that people actually come, right? So you don't you don't want free registration, but like you don't want a barrier either. Any other
Still seems
thoughts?
cheaper than CSPC actually.
Yes, CSPC is very expensive. Very expensive. And like prohibiting even our own like federal employed colleagues that live in this city to attend, which is wild to me, but here we are.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we've got work to do, Mamoon, but I think it's exciting and it's really great to have connected with everyone. And I think we're sort of at a tipping point for a lot of these different initiatives in Canada and, keeping pace with changes in other contexts. So really excited to have connected with everyone, and we'll be in touch with a summary and next steps. And a part of that, I think, will certainly be another sort of town hall like this to reconvene. Excellent. Take care.
Take care.
Don't
Thank
hesitate
you.
to reach
Bye-bye.
out if you ever have
Okay.
questions or want to chat.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
See ya.